Today we're going to be working on the review, Unit 3 review sheet. I'm going to divide this into 3 different videos. Video 1 is going to be on page 1 and 2. For my pre-AP class, remember you can always use the calculator only on word problems that has really big numbers or discriminants or quadratic formula. Now for numbers like this, you cannot use the calculator. My academic, you can use the calculator whenever you want to. So let's work on number 1. If you want to simplify this, it means you have to try to find what the square root of 169 is, and that is 13. Since you have a negative under the radical, then your answer will have an I. The reason behind that is that when you square root a negative number on the calculator, you're going to have an error. So square root of a negative number does not really exist. So I represent an imaginary number, and every time you square root a number, the answer should have a plus or a negative. So plus or minus 13i. Square root of 625 is going to be 25, and since we're square rooting a number, it's plus or minus. It does not have an I because there's no negative under the radical. Now I'm going to do the rest really fast. Square root of negative 81 is going to be plus or minus 9i. Square root of 121 is going to be plus or minus 11. This is going to be plus or minus 5i, and square root of 49 is going to be 7. Now let's move on to the other part. 7 through 15. Let's work on number 7. Number 7, as you can see, that there is addition on between those two parentheses. So basically we don't FOIL, we don't multiply, we add them. So let's copy all the numbers that you see in front of you. The plus does not change the sign. So 7 minus 2 is going to be a 5. Negative 9i and negative 6i is going to be a negative 15i. So your final answer is going to be 5 minus 15i. I'm going to do 10 and 11 since it's similar. So negative 6 plus 5i, since there's a positive sign, so I just add them. So negative 6 and plus 3 is going to be negative 3, and 5i and negative 6i is going to be a negative 2i, so negative 3 minus 2i. Now again here, negative 10 minus 4i minus 7 plus 3i. Again, since there's an addition sign, so I just add them. Negative 10 and negative 7 is going to be negative 17. Negative 4i plus 3i is going to be minus I, so that's going to be your final answer. Negative 17 minus I. Now let's move on to number 8. Since there's a subtraction sign, it means you have to subtract those. So it's going to change the sign of the number and the parentheses after it. So 7 minus 9i is going to stay as 7 minus 9i. The minus negative 2 is going to become positive, and the minus negative 6i is going to be plus 6i. So as you can see, the negative change the signs in the parentheses. So 7 and 2 will be 9. Negative 9i plus 6i is going to be negative 3i, so the final answer is going to be 9 minus 3i. Now again, you copy the first numbers, and the negative is going to change the sign of those. So it's going to be negative 3 plus 7i. Negative 6 minus 3 is going to be negative 9, plus 5i plus 7i is going to be plus 12i. So the final answer is going to be negative 9 plus 12i. Again, negative 10 minus 4i does not change. The negative changes the sign of the parentheses that's next to it. So it's going to be plus 7 minus 3i. So negative 10 and plus 7 is going to be negative 3, and negative 4i and negative 3i is going to be negative 7i. So your final answer is negative 3 minus 7i. Now let's move on to number 9. Now here there's nothing between those two parentheses, so basically you are multiplying them, so you FOIL. So 7 times negative 2 is going to be negative 14. 7 times negative 6i is going to be negative 42i. Negative 9i minus 2 is going to be times negative 2, it's going to be positive 18i, and negative 9i times negative 6i is going to be positive 54i squared. Now let me make this a little bit bigger so I can write on it. Okay, so let's combine like terms. Negative 42 plus 18 is going to be and negative 24i. You copy the rest. Keep in mind that an I square means 1, negative 1. It means negative 1. Keep that in mind. It means that the 54i square is basically negative 54. And negative 14, those two together will become, so negative 14 and negative 54, so the negative 14 and the negative 54 now will become negative 68, so you write it down. Let me choose a different color. Negative 68. And this middle one, you just copy it, so it's going to be negative 24i, so your final answer is going to be negative 68 minus 24i. So again, you have to combine the negative 14 and the negative 54 to get negative 68. And the reason why I have a negative 54 is that I got it from, let me choose a different color. I got it from adding those two negative numbers, and the middle one, you just copy it because there's nothing to add to negative 24i. So that's going to be your final answer. Now let's move on to number 12. Let me erase everything and work on number 12. Number 12. Again, you have to multiply, so negative 6 times 3 and negative 6 times negative 7i. Negative 6 times 3 is going to be negative 18. Negative 6 times negative 7i is going to be plus 42i. Then you multiply the 5i. Let me choose a different color. Then you multiply the 5i by 3 and the 5i by negative 7i. So 5 times 3 is 15i. And 5i times negative 7i is going to be negative 35i squared. Remember that I squared is equal to negative 1. Keep that in mind. So let me combine those in the middle. 42 plus 15 is going to be 57i. And this is going to be plus 35 because the I square is a negative 1, and negative 1 times negative 35. So you just replace I squared by negative 1. You multiply it by negative 35, so it becomes positive 35. So the I square over here always changes the sign of the number. So if it's a negative, it becomes positive, and you copy the negative 18. Now negative 18 and plus 35 is going to be 17, and you just copy 57i, so your final answer is going to be 17 plus 57i. Now we do the same thing for number 15. It's going to be 82 minus 2i. That's going to be your final answer. Now let's move on to numbers 16 through 18. Now let's talk about number 16. They want me to solve for x, and since there's only x squared, there is no x, there's nothing else. So the easiest way to solve this one is by moving the 36 to the other side by subtracting 36 from both sides. Plus 36 minus 36 is gone. So 4x squared is equal to negative 36. You divide both sides by 4. So x squared is going to be negative 9. Now when you square root both sides, because you're interested in x and not in x squared, square root of negative 9, since I have a negative, so there should be an I in your answer, so plus or minus 3i. So x can be either 3i, can either be 3i or negative 3i. That's going to be your final answer. Now let's move on to number 17. Now since there's only x squared, the easiest way to solve something like this is by moving the 100 to the other side. So 5x squared is equal to negative 100. Again, divide by 5 both sides. So x squared is going to be equal to negative 20. Square root both sides. So x is going to be an answer that has an I in it, since it's a negative 20 under the radical. Now the 20, you have to take it on this side and try to think of the factor tree. Now 2 times 10. 2 is a prime number, so you circle it. 10 is 2 times 5. Circle 2, circle 5. Since I have a couple of the 2, so it goes out of the radical, and 5 is all alone, so it stays under the radical. So plus or minus 2 radical 5, and there's an I in our answer. Remember, always keep the I between the number and the radical. It looks much better. So the answer is going to be plus or minus 2I radical 5. Now let's move on to number 18.